Hello and welcome to the first edition of Digital Heals. I'm your host Creeth, and today we're going to be talking about Ret Pallies in 6.0.3 for Warlords of Draenor. After this video, I hope you have a better understanding of your Ret Pally, and hopefully you're topping the DPS charts. The first thing I actually want to talk about is your talents. So looking at your talents, you're level 15 to start with. This is actually going to be your movement talents. You have Speed of Light, Long Arm of the Law, and Pursuit of Justice. I'm typically going to stick with Speed of Light. This is going to give us an increase in our movement speed by 70% for 8 seconds, and that's castable. So every 45 seconds we can cast this and increase our movement speed by 70%. But like I said, this is what I use the majority of the time. However, there are going to be times where Long Arm of the Law I think is better, especially in fights in High Maul like Twins. There's a lot of fire on the ground at times. When we're casting our Judgment, it's going to increase our movement speed by 45% for 3 seconds. So when I want to move quickly, I just cast my Judgment, I move quickly instead of having to wait for my cooldown on Speed of Light. Pursuit of Justice is an actual passive. This is going to increase our movement speed by 15% plus an additional 5% for each charge of Holy Power. I don't use this, so like I said, I'm going to stick between Speed of Light and Long Arm of the Law. Our level 30 talent is actually going to be our stun and CC talent. We've got Fist of Justice, which is going to stun a target for 6 seconds. Repentance, which is our CC, and actually one of the best CCs. This is going to CC a target for 60 seconds. And Blinding Light. You will notice that in most raids, most of the targets are not stunnable, so CC will be necessary in progression. So I do use Repentance, Fist of Justice, or you know, my hammer, you know, when I'm just kind of running regular. Blinding Light, I don't really see a use for it a lot of the time. What ends up happening is it will kind of daze everything, but as soon as they get hit by any kind of AoE or damage, they're going to break that. Level 45 talent, we're going to choose between Selfless Healer, Eternal Flame, and Sacred Shield. I do pick Selfless Healer the majority of the time. A successful Judgment reduces the cast time and mana cost of your next Flash of Light by 35% and increases its effect on others by 20%, and this stacks up to 3 times. So if you'll see down here, I do have my Flash of Light. This is great in progression, especially when healers and tanks call out for using your personals. When this does stack 3 times, you actually will be casting at 105% for 105%. That's a really fast, large heal. You know, if someone's being hurt, or if I'm getting hurt and I need to heal them or I need to help out, I'll throw that. It's a great way to kind of keep somebody up or keep yourself up. Eternal Flame, I stay away from this just because it does consume Holy Power, and I'm going to typically use my Holy Power for my DPS. So this will kind of like suck down your DPS, so I stay away from this. Sacred Shield protects a target with a shield of Holy Light for 30 seconds, absorbing up to 8,435 damage every 5.54 seconds. Only one target can be affected at a time. I'm really not throwing shields on people here. You know, I've got my heal down here, so if I need to use it quickly, I will. Our level 60 talent, we're going to choose between Hand of Purity, Unbreakable Spirit, and Clemency. Now, once again, this is going to be great for progression because survivability is so important, and we do want to help out our healers and our tanks at times. Hand of Purity places a hand on a friendly target, reducing damage taken by 10% and damage over time by an additional 80% for 6 seconds. This is not a bad choice. However, Unbreakable Spirit is what I'm going to typically stick with. This is going to reduce the cooldown of our Divine Shield, Divine Protection, and our Lay on Hands by 50%. Now that is huge. As a Pally, our Bubble is one of the best spells we have for survivability. If we find ourselves trapped somewhere, we're about to die, popping personals, you know, this is going to protect us from all damage. Lay on Hands is a huge heal, as most of you know. It's going to put most people, you know, back to full health and then our actual Divine Protection, which is going to reduce magical damage by 40% for 8 seconds. So my Divine Protection, Divine Shield, and my Lay on Hands, I use these quite a bit, and having the cooldown reduced by 50%, which takes them from a 10-minute cooldown to a 5-minute cooldown, is huge. So I usually stick with Unbreakable Spirit here. Level 75 talents, you're going to really choose between Holy Avenger and Sanctified Wrath. Holy Avenger abilities, it generates Holy Power, will deal an additional 30% additional damage and healing, and generates 3 charges of Holy Power for the next 18 seconds. This is a great DPS and healing cooldown. However, it is a cast, whereas Sanctified Wrath is a passive. Avenging Wrath lasts 50% longer and grants more frequent access to one of your abilities while it lasts. This is going to basically keep your abilities up longer. It increases your Avenging Wrath, which is your biggest cooldown. It increases that by 50%. Our Avenging Wrath increases all damage and healing caused by 20% for 30 seconds. So we're increasing this by 50%. That's a huge DPS buff right there. We're using Avenging Wrath every time it's coming off of cooldown, unless we're saving it specifically for a certain time in the fight. So I stick with Sanctified Wrath. Some people will choose Holy Avenger, but it's one less button you actually have to push, and I don't see enough of a difference between the two to really choose the Holy Avenger at this point. That may change later. Our level 90 talent, we're going to choose between Holy Prism, Light's Hammer, Execution Sentence. I stay away from Holy Prism, and I do stick with Light's Hammer and Execution Sentence. Execution Sentence and Light's Hammer both work in that they can either heal or they can do damage. Execution Sentence, we're going to use that for a single target fight. Light's Hammer we're going to use for multi-targets or AoE fights. So it just really depends on what you're fighting at the time. Using the twins again in Highmaul, I like using Light's Hammer when we all stack. It's going to help heal the raid, plus the bosses share a health pool. It's gonna do more damage, so I pick that one there. And then our level 100 talent, which we actually got with Warlords, we're going to choose between Final Verdict, Seraphim, and Empowered Seals. Now, Seraphim, off just looking at it, seems like it would be the best choice here because it's going to increase our haste, multi-strike, mastery, versatility, and bonus armor by 1,000 for 15 seconds. But the catch is you have to actually generate 5 charges of Holy Power before you can cast this. Once you cast this, we're going to have to generate anywhere from 3 to 5 charges to be able to use one of our larger spells like our Templar's Verdict or our Divine Storm, and it takes a little while to actually cast those, especially with our haste being lower at the early stages of the expansion. So you don't really get 15 seconds of 1,000 increase. You do technically, but you don't get to use it. I've noticed, and from what I've seen, a lot of people agree, Final Verdict is really the way to go here. This is going to replace your Templar's Verdict, and it empowers your weapons with holy energy and performs a devastating strike, dealing 15,357 holy damage. This is the really great part. It also increases the damage and radius of your next Divine Storm by 100%. So your Divine Storm is your big AoE strike, and we're increasing the radius and the damage by 100%. So after we cast our Final Verdict, we want to make sure that we're using our Divine Storm because it's really increasing the damage here. Once again, I've used both of them. I like Final Verdict a lot more at this point. Once again, that could change, but Final Verdict, Empowered Seals, I don't really care for too much. I don't really mess with. I haven't seen a lot of people using it. That doesn't mean they don't. I enjoy using the Final Verdict though. Now on to glyphs, actually. Glyphs for the most part are going to be cosmetic, a lot of defensive stuff, not necessarily a lot of DPS boosts here. These are really a lot of personal choices. We have 3 major glyphs and 3 minor glyphs. The 3 major glyphs that I've actually chosen, the first one would be Hand of Sacrifice. Hand of Sacrifice actually is going to reduce the damage taken by 30% for 12 seconds on a friendly raid member. The problem with Hand of Sacrifices is it will typically redirect the damage to the caster. So if I were to cast this on a tank or a healer or somebody else, it's going to actually reduce their damage, but it's going to transfer to me. By using Glyph of Hand of Sacrifice, it's going to prevent the damage from being transferred to me. In progression fights where you need to kind of help some people out at times, or, you know, use personals, this is nice to have to throw on somebody to really kind of help out preventing someone from dying. The other major glyph I use would be Templar's Verdict. Once again, I kind of chose these things as we're going through progression here, really to kind of help with survivability. Templar's Verdict, you take 10% less damage for 6 seconds after dealing damage with Templar's Verdict or Exorcism. Now we have replaced Templar's Verdict with our final verdict. It still works, you know, it just calls it Templar's Verdict here. So just a nice kind of little cooldown to have. And also the final glyph would be Divine Storm. Your Divine Storm also heals you for 4% of your maximum health. Once again, just kind of helps keep our heal up, helps the healers a little bit, and you know, really helps with progression. Our minor cooldowns are simply cosmetic. I have Falling Avenger, which if I'm falling and I pop my Avenging Wrath, this is actually going to give me slow fall. Glyph of Bladed Judgment, just basically it's a cosmetic change, and my Exorcism glyph here just is going to change the way it looks. So, like I said, these are mainly actually just cosmetic. You really can kind of pick whatever you feel will be necessary for your fights. Moving on to our actual seals, we have 2 seals to really choose from when we're doing any DPS. The first seal is the Seal of Truth. This is what we're going to use probably 90% of the time. Fills you with Holy Light, causing melee attacks to deal 768 additional holy damage and applies Censure to the target. Okay, Censure deals 262 additional holy damage over 15 seconds, and it stacks up to 5 times. Like I said, this is what we're going to use the majority of the time. Our second choice is going to be Seal of Righteousness, and this is only going to be used on fights where we know we're going to have 4 or more targets. This is going to fill you with Holy Light, causing melee attacks to deal 768 holy damage to all targets within 8 yards. Like I said, we're really not going to use this very much, except if we're going to be in a fight with 4 or more targets. That does not happen very often, so we're going to really usually stick with Seal of Truth. And then, you know, our buffs, we have our Blessing of Might, and we have our Blessing of Kings. When you're in a raid or in a dungeon or any kind of party, you know, you're typically going to cast whatever, you know, needs to be cast from a Paladin. Blessing of Kings, you know, can be replaced with Paw from a Druid, or, you know, from monks. And then we have our Blessing of Might. So, and that's going to increase mastery. We're going to get into our actual stat priorities here in a second, and you know, mastery is one of our largest as far as stat priorities goes. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about would actually be our macros. Now, I don't run a lot of macros, but the one I do actually has my Avenging Wrath, my Execution Sentence, and my Strength Potion, all macroed together. So at the beginning of a fight, when we want to do a lot of our damage, typically when Hero is being popped, Hero, Lust, whatever you want to call it, depending on if you're Horde or Alliance. This is going to pop all those at the same time for me. If you're not really familiar with macros, you can go into your macros here and create your different macros like so. So I'm going to cast my Avenging Wrath, cast my Execution Sentence, and use my generic Strength Potion. Now, some people do get a lot more in-depth with macros. I find this one to be very helpful, but I really don't need, you know, much more than that. Stat priority. Now, stat priority is pretty straightforward. It does depend on who you talk to and what website you read. There are some slight differences. What everybody can agree on, though, is the top 3 stats. Strength is obviously going to be our most important stat. After that, we're going to go with Mastery. And then third is one of our new stats from Warlords, which is Multi-Strength. The next stat is where some people differ. Some people are going to say Haste. Some people are going to say Crit. I typically subscribe to the Haste stat being next. I do know that once gear goes up, Haste will be used more, just like it has been in the past. some people do say crit, and then it goes, you know, versatility. So, strength, mastery, multi-strike, haste, crit, versatility is what I use for my stats. Finally, what we want to talk about is our actual rotation. One of the things I want everyone to notice right off the rip here is going to be this little guy down here. This is actually CLC Ret. This is one of the add-ons I use, and what this does is allow me to actually put my rotation right into the add-on, and it will serve up the next attack I should be using. Now, I don't follow this all the time. There are definitely going to be times where I might stray away from it depending on what fight's going on, and those are the kind of things you need to know, whether you're doing a single target rotation or a AoE rotation. So what this does is it will show me the next thing I need to use. My DPS rotation, my priority is actually going to start with Divine Storm buffed with Final Verdict. Now remember, you're not going to necessarily be able to cast these in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. However, when everything is available, this is just telling you what you should choose over the others. So, Divine Storm with my Final Verdict buff. This is going to increase my Divine Storm damage by 100% and the radius. Next would be my Final Verdict with 5 charges of Holy Power. We want to keep our Holy Power up as much as we possibly can. Our Execution Sentence is going to come next. Hammer of Wrath, which is actually going to only show up when our target is below 35% or we have our Avenging Wrath popped. Alright, this is one of our big hitting spells here. Crusader Strike, this is going to be one of your attacks that actually builds Holy Power. Judgment, which is going to build your Holy Power, and depending on whether or not you are using your Long Arm of the Law, is going to give you your speed buff. Then we go to Exorcism, which is also going to give you another charge of Holy Power. And then finally, our Final Verdict with 3 charges of Holy Power. Now, I have that all set up. As you watch the beginning of this video and the end of the video, you will see this add-on moving and showing me what I need to actually hit next here. So, as you can see, you know, the DPS isn't too bad. I usually lead most fights. A lot of movement fights are kind of difficult for melee, but where we do get to kind of not move too much, we can really do a lot of damage in this expansion so far, which is really kind of great because, quite frankly, Paladins are the best. So please remember, if you have any questions, leave a comment, and if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks.
Hey,